I thank Senator McCain and Senator Durbin for moving through their debate swiftly so I would have this opportunity to speak in support of a landmark piece of legislation that has been offered as an amendment, the Hate Crimes Prevention Amendment, named after Matthew Shepard. This bill is a long time coming, and I know that we could make a process argument. We do it well around here. But it seems to me we can move this defense bill through quickly. We are doing that. We will do that. It has strong support, but we can also take care of this long neglected, important piece of legislation whose passage will protect and defend our citizens from hate crimes. It has been more than 10 long years since the senseless death of Matthew Shepard, a tragedy that showed us that we have a long way to go before we can truly say in this country there is equal justice for all. Let's look back at what happened to Matthew Shepard 10 long years ago. Two men offered Matthew Shepard, a gay man, a ride in their car. Subsequently, Shepard was robbed. He was pistol whipped, he was tortured, he was tied to a fence in a remote rural area, and he was left to die. Mr. President, this wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment situation. We know from the pair's then-girlfriends who testified under oath that the two men plotted beforehand to rob a gay man in particular. That crime occurred because Matthew Shepard was a gay man. Well, they robbed him, they tortured him, and they killed him. And this crime should be a federal crime. And yes, we have tried to pass that hate crimes legislation for years and years. There's always an excuse. We don't have the time. It's not relevant to the bill. Well, Matthew Shepard's family, what happened to them will never go away. The loss that they carry in their hearts will never disappear. But the one thing we can do to ease their burden is to pass this legislation. Hate crimes are particularly offensive because they are propelled by bias and by bigotry. They not only inflict harm on the victims, but they instill fear in entire communities. That is why I have, and I ask to put into the record, a strong letter of support from my sheriff from Los Angeles, Lee Baca. I would ask unanimous consent that this be put in the record at this time.
Without objection.
I want to note that Lee Baca happens to be a Republican. I want to note that this law enforcement individual is very strong on this. He says that this hate crimes deals with a civil rights issue, and he quotes President Obama to protect all of our citizens from violent acts of intolerance. And Lee Baca adds in his own words, hate crimes are a scourge in our society, and they have no place in humanity. Mr. President, what we're dealing with is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. Attorney General Holder, when he testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, reported that the FBI said that there were 7,624 hate crime incidents in 2007. That's the most recent data. 7,624 hate crime incidents. Now, if we pass this bill, we send a signal that the federal government will not stand by and watch this sort of thing happen. We send a message that we will be a backup, that we will supply the law enforcement personnel, the forensics assistants, anything that the local prosecutor needs and the local police needs to help them. Eric Holder also testified that between 1998 and 2007, more than 77,000 hate crime incidents were reported by the FBI. That is one hate crime for every hour of every day for a decade. Statistics are one thing, the individual stories are horrifying. I'll give you another example. The case of Lawrence Larry King, a 15-year-old boy from Oxnard, California. Larry, an 8th grader, was shot and killed by a fellow student in the middle of a classroom in February of 2008. According to news reports, the shooting occurred the day after the students had a verbal altercation about Larry's sexual orientation. The police and the district attorney classified the murder as a hate crime. The district attorney said there had never been a violent shooting like this before in Ventura County, in my state. A young life ended too soon by a violent act of hate. Yes, my state is not immune from these crimes. In Richmond, California, 4 men were arrested and charged for brutally gang raping a young lesbian. According to news reports, one of the attackers taunted her for being a lesbian during the attack. And after that heinous incident, a young black man in Richmond was attacked. According to the young man's police report, his attackers yelled racial epithets and slurs as they broke 6 of his bones. And finally, another example, in 2006, a man walked into an Amish school in Pennsylvania, taking several female students hostage and releasing all the male students. He shot 10 of the girls, killing five before shooting himself. The age of these girls is from 6 to 13 years old. These girls lost their lives because of a despicable act of hate based on their gender. Mr. President, there's no reason to come to the floor and say we can't do this bill because we have other very important business on our plate. Of course we do. Of course we need to do the defense bill. Of course we will do the defense bill. Last I checked, the defense authorization usually passes practically unanimously. This isn't a problem. So we can deal with this. We've done it before. These stories demonstrate that if America is to serve as a model for tolerance and justice, we must do everything in our power to fight hate-motivated violence. And this amendment is an important step in that fight. This amendment is an important step as we continue to form a more perfect union. And we can't rest until we do this and more. We can't rest until we pass laws to create a fair workplace for all. And we can't rest until we pass a law that repeals Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and allows our capable Americans and our patriotic Americans to serve our country. We are losing some of the best and brightest from our military because they don't want to live a lie. We can't rest until we pass laws to end racial profiling in our society. We can't rest until we pass comprehensive laws to protect our children from violent crimes. Years ago, I wrote the Violence Against Children Act. I am still waiting to get it passed. When you take up a hand against a child and you injure that child and hurt that child, that's un-American too. And if there's a violent crime against a child, I believe the federal government ought to care and ought to help the local governments who are trying to solve that crime and punish that crime if they need help. So we have a lot of work to do to form that more perfect union. And, you know, instead of arguing process today, why don't we have our friends come to the floor and say, this is a wonderful opportunity now to take a step forward and pass this Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which we've been trying to do for so long. And of course, not slow down the defense bill. There's no need to slow down the defense bill. We can do both. And I urge my colleagues to vote for this amendment and any kind of procedural vote it takes to make it available to us on the floor of the Senate.